Okay, everybody, we're going to head and get started so we can stay on time. So please make your way to your seats. We are going to open up some doors, get some fresh air moving in here. Grab your coffee, grab some sweets, grab some sugar, whatever you need. Okay, but first, we have something very exciting from the UC Berkeley family to Marietje Schaake. Now, she's at Stanford, and we love our Stanford friends, but we needed to make sure that baby Schaake is well prepared for a future of applying to UC Berkeley. And I'll introduce Camille Crittenden. She's the Executive Director of Citrus in the Banatow Institute and co-founder of the Citrus Policy Lab, who will be introducing our keynote speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Brandy. Welcome, everyone. I know you've been here for most of the day and really pleased to have still a lot of exciting things to come on the program. I just want to say publicly thank you to Brandy for the tremendous amount of work that she's put into making today possible. And now it's my honor to introduce our afternoon keynote speaker, Marietje Schaake. She is the International Policy Director at the Stanford University Cyber Policy Center and an International Policy Fellow at Stanford's Institute for Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence. She served as a member of the European Parliament for the Dutch Liberal Democratic Party from 2009 to 2019, focusing on trade, foreign affairs, and technology policies. Marietje writes a monthly column for the Financial Times and serves on the UN's AI advisory body. She is the author of The Tech Coup, How to Save Democracy from Silicon Valley. Marietje.
Thank you so much. First of all, for the baby swag, which I'm sure will be the best PR Berkeley has ever gotten at Stanford. So I really appreciate it. And then thank you for mentioning my book. It's coming out in September, so it's not like you didn't do your homework. Not to worry, it's just not available yet. But some of the things that I'll try to add to the very rich and diverse set of voices that we've heard today are actually further developed in the book. So let me join those in congratulating the Goldman School team for a really excellent tech policy summit today. I'm a little bit jealous doing tech policy at Stanford that you've done this big summit, but I'm sure it will be the inaugural one in a long series of successful gatherings on a topic that I think is incredibly urgent and will be with us for a while to come. What I tell my students is that the next decade will be decisive for tech policy for the next century. And I actually believe that is the case. I often say that because I hope to inspire them to take the route towards public policy and not the red carpet that is so easy to walk onto to the Silicon Valley companies. There is huge momentum around tech policy. We've heard that today. There's so much to discuss. There's such a great sense of urgency, particularly around AI. But I would say we are dealing with a systems challenge. And so it's really important that we understand what is at hand, what is at stake for us, in order to make the right steps forward. I believe that the biggest challenge is that tech companies have too much power and that hurts democracy. And that is also where the course correction needs to take place. Now, before I continue, is it important that I keep this laptop open or can I close it? Okay, then I'll close it. It will give me better space for my very old-fashioned talking points. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, if we want to see the problem, we see examples of this outsized power of tech companies every day in new ways. Let's take just this past week. Headlines in the Netherlands, the country where I'm born and still read the news, announced that the economy exceeded the value of 1 trillion euros for the very first time in history. So that means that our entire country's economy is now worth 40% of the value of Microsoft, which is valued at about 3 trillion euros, or dollars, I should say, today, and it will probably grow. Now, for context, the Netherlands is a small country, but it's the 18th largest economy in the world. So if we were to plot Microsoft in the ranking that is done of countries and their economies, it would rank between the 8th and the seventh largest in the world between France and Italy. I think it's important to let that sink in for a moment. Now, of course, economic value is not the only way to measure power, but it has impact on almost everything that we've talked about today. The ability to attract talent, the ability to lobby politicians, to acquire data, and hotly now, microchips compute. In tech, we have seen capital and data being key ingredients to stand up next generations of technologies with significant impact, and those who have capital and a market position already have a leg up compared to competitors in making that next wave a reality. Now, the lack of guardrails to the unbridled growth of technology companies, both in terms of their capital and their power in the past, is actually causing exacerbated imbalances not only in the market, but also in the relationship between private power and public governance. And this asymmetry is predicted to only grow further in the future. So that was just one headline of this past week. Let's take another hot topic of today, the resource uses by data centers and AI companies. The Atlantic last week published Karen Howe's excellent investigative story into the use of water and electricity to cool data centers in the Arizona desert, one of the hotter places in the United States. Now, often we'll see that actually cool Nordic countries, like Northern European countries, or cooler US states are a popular destination for data centers. That is because it would actually avoid the costs of cooling down the servers because the natural environment does most of it. We have a number of examples also in a small country that is the second most densely populated in the world, but still a destination that companies have successfully lobbied for discounted energy contracts to build data centers on the rare open fields that still remain or that could be used for agriculture. There are now around 300 data centers in our country. The country is around the size of the state of Rhode Island. Now, most of the companies that engage in lobbying for government contracts tend to do so behind shell foundations so that local politicians or citizens don't know who is doing the bidding. We saw, for example, stories about competing contenders for permits for data centers, one called Polder Networks, which was in fact Meta. And only when the needed paperwork has been rubber stamped do these companies then reveal who they really are, Amazon, Microsoft, or Google for that matter. And by that time, there's already a new black box, literally, if you know what a data center looks like, in the backyard of people's neighborhoods. Now, one of the challenges for governments so far is that they take quite a fragmented approach to allowing data centers to establish and to be operated. For example, the city of Amsterdam now has a moratorium. I don't even know where they would place another data center, but that's another story. But if you're a company and you want to establish in the Netherlands, all you can do is just go a few miles down the road, because in the province, there may be a completely different kind of policy, and then on the national level, yet another policy. And if you look at how many data centers are already planned out for the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, even if we would stop today, everywhere in the world, there would still be enormous amounts of these centers being rolled out, while headlines today in the US as well as in the Netherlands speak about serious pressure on electricity grids. And of course, we all know the problems with natural resources like water. So to me, it is quite remarkable that there has not been more coordinated policy around the establishment of data centers. It is also ironic that there are no standards agreed to measuring the use of natural resources by data centers. Companies don't have to be transparent about it. Only a handful are proactively. And the challenge is that while they are experts at storing data, there's hardly any data about how they operate from the perspective of the use of natural resources. Now, the other example just from this week came to mind when we had dinner with a few tech thinkers, and the Deputy Secretary General of NATO to discuss the role of technology on the battlefield, notably in Ukraine, where, as we all know, a brutal war still rages on and people are dying on a daily basis. But a lot of the examples are relevant for the rest of the world, actually. We should not think about technology being used in fields of war anymore, but also think about technologies as becoming the battlefields of conflict. In the moments leading up to the invasion of Ukraine, analysts were actually imagining that this might be the first full-blown cyber war. You may remember the anticipation of those days, and that was not surprising given Russia's track record. The NotPetya attack had already targeted Ukrainian government departments, media organizations, and power companies, causing global damage of around 10 billion euros, more like $12 billion in US currency, back in 2017. Now, thankfully, the worst fears of how a cyber war might materialize have not happened. Ukraine has proven remarkably resilient, but the role of technology is also different than was anticipated ahead of time. Technologies are playing a leading role in Ukraine's battlefields as the country continues to defend its homeland against Russia's war of aggression. But instead of an all-out cyber war, we see that civilian and military technologies are tested and used in new ways. Hybrid conflict, but also blurred lines between civilian and military uses of technologies. And some corporate leaders can hardly hide their excitement about the war as an opportunity to do business. Defense tech is now one of the darlings of venture capitalists. The CEO of Palantir, Alex Karp, claims that his data analytics company Palantir is making a decisive difference in favor of Ukraine. For example, through their AI products that support identifying targets. Former Google lead Eric Schmidt, who's still an important advisor to the government of this country, and many others, traveled to Ukraine, met with the president and the defense minister, and apparently scoped out future investment opportunities while he is supporting a local startup incubator for military technologies. The elsewhere controversial AI company Clearview is facing fines for violating the privacy laws of the European Union, but is keenly offering its technologies to hundreds of Ukrainian officials. They use it to identify Russian soldiers, dead or alive, committing war crimes and looting. Now, for all of the bragging of tech CEOs, William LaPlante, I hope I say this correctly, the US Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition and Sustainment, has warned that fighting is not done by, quote, Silicon Valley right now, even though they're going to try very hard to take credit for it, end of quote. I'm not sure that these words reach the right places, because actually, for a lot of people in the Valley, the Ukraine war is seen as a positive game changer. But none of the CEOs that I mentioned play as important a role as Elon Musk. Ukraine depends on his SpaceX Starlink satellite constellations for coordinating war efforts. I quote, "Starlink is indeed the blood of our entire communication infrastructure right now," said Ukraine's digital minister. It is often the only way to get internet access, and it is used for coordinating drone strikes and gathering intelligence. SpaceX has tens of thousands of Starlink terminals in Ukraine that are used by the military, but also hospitals, businesses, and civil society organizations. Even if physical infrastructure is bombarded, as it unfortunately is, people can stay online. So initially, Elon Musk was hailed as a savior by Ukrainian politicians and received appreciation from around the world. But that quickly changed when the company threatened to discontinue the services unless the US government would pick up a large portion of the bill associated with it. And it did. Then there was a moment when Starlink was needed on Crimea, but not provided. And we can all read recent reports that reveal how Russia has been buying Starlink systems despite international sanctions. Musk, in the meantime, is also getting involved in geopolitical thinking, launched a peace plan, so to say, and said, quote, "We should be negotiating. Putin wants peace. We should be negotiating peace with Putin." Well, the Kremlin could not agree more. So in Ukraine, but increasingly everywhere, we see that battlefields are now full of companies. Defense tech is raising billions of dollars in funding rounds, but also commercial satellite images from companies like Maxar have helped identify, through open source investigations, Russian troop movements, mass graves, all kinds of details of the war that previously would not be so easy to uncover. So technology companies are, in many ways, the middle of the front line between the battles between democracy and authoritarianism. In Ukraine, they took the side of, or in the war between Russia and Ukraine, they took the side of Ukraine. I think in other conflicts, it's much less clear where companies stand and on which international legal bases. Think about all the controversies now in the Israel-Palestinian violence that is happening. And also not too long ago, we saw a completely different kind of development. When Russians went to the polls for voting in 2021, Apple and Google actually complied with the Kremlin's demands to remove an app by the opposition movement from Alexei Navalny, who was then still alive, remove this app from the app stores. This happened only days before the elections. This app was designed to help Russian voters find in any election district the candidate that was best positioned to get a majority vis-a-vis Putin's candidates. And Navalny, in reaction, called the companies cowards and Putin's accomplices. But because without this app being in the app stores, it's not like these apps are not available, but it's so much harder to find them that millions of people would never even really download the app at all. Oddly enough, there was no comment from democratic governments, either about the pressure that Russia put on these companies or about the actions that the companies took in turn to take down these apps. So going back to the role of companies in active military conflicts, it raises tough questions about the concept that actually underpins the foundations of international relations and international law, state sovereignty. This principle, which I'm sure you're aware, assumes that a government is responsible for the activities within its borders and is mandated to commit to international standards and agreements. Most famously, states that signed the UN Charter after World War II, for example, holds them to account in a host of commitments regarding human rights that were discussed in the previous panel, but also notions like the use of force, because even in war, there are rules. There are treaties, conventions that bind signatory governments to uphold everything from the laws of armed conflict to trade agreements to the Treaty on the Laws of the Seas. And typically, also ideally, there are mechanisms of accountability for those who don't comply. Of course, there are rules for the behavior of companies too, but they are often about reporting revenue, accounting standards, and filing taxes, but not so much on how they should behave in military confrontations or in hybrid conflict. But tech companies are beginning to exude sovereign powers in new ways. They have monopolies on key insights in terms of threats over infrastructure, and they make key decisions about affairs that used to be squarely in the hands of states. But of course, comparable checks and balances are missing. Even if we think back to the history of this very country, the first US president, George Washington, started the executive branch in the US with just 3 departments: the Department of State, Treasury, and War. And now, 2 centuries later, many fundamental duties of those foundational departments, think about rights protections at home and abroad, monetary policy and national security, are actually increasingly executed by technology companies. Without proper regulation, we see that new products like cryptocurrencies or facial recognition technologies mean that the state is no longer able to fully control monetary policies or to guarantee human rights such as the right to privacy or freedom from discrimination. This kind of great outsourcing or tech coup of governments is fundamentally rewriting the rules of the social contract between citizens and democratic states. The challenges to the role of the state are obviously clearest when we look at the moment when war begins. When a tank rolls down the street and invades by crossing a nation's border, the situation is usually clear. The United Nations Charter committing member states to refrain from threats and the use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state kicks in. When soldiers manning the tank then proceed to shoot at people at a school, hospital, or at any civilian target such as energy, infrastructure, the Geneva Convention, establishing legal standards for humanitarian treatment in war, is violated. And even then, with these rules in place, achieving accountability and meeting the thresholds for the burden of proof are difficult enough. But at least there are guardrails. In the case of cyber attacks, the case is much less clear. Because even before tanks invaded Ukraine in 2022, a barrage of digital attacks was launched against targets in the country. Since the illegal annexation of Crimea in 2014, 10 years ago, there was the attack on the power grid in the middle of winter of 2015. In early 2022, there were DDoS attacks shutting down websites of banks, and wiper malware was aimed at deleting crucial information in the hands of the Ukrainian government. And all of these attacks could be traced back to Russia. And yet many experts, we could also see it in the news over the past weeks, would say that the invasion did not begin until troops crossed the border on February 24th, 2022. For the White House, too, cyber does not meet the threshold of war. General Nakasone, head of US Cyber Command, said that the United States has used offensive, so attacking cyber operations, to take out Russian targets. This so-called hunt forward strategy would be needed to take out foreign hackers and their tools before they are used against US targets. But when a journalist asked a White House spokesperson whether his words implied the direct engagement of Russia, the answer was a firm no. The status of cyber attacks remains legally ambivalent in the context of conflict. And of course, this kind of approach stands in a very stark contrast to America's more passive role in the kinetic Russian war against Ukraine. It swiftly drew the line of involvement at NATO's physical borders. And instead, the country sent weapons to Ukrainians to defend itself. It did not want US soldiers facing Russians. So what we see is that our international laws do not recognize or properly work amidst the realities of new technologies and their corporate governors, and I think that that must change. While political responses, such as targeted sanctions that both the EU and the US have adopted, are certainly beginning to close an accountability gap, also binding companies to withdraw from a country that's aggressive like Russia, for example, these kind of ad hoc measures cannot replace the clarity of a legal framework that is constantly applicable or the efficacy of more conventional enforcement methods like prosecution. And this is necessary not only to hold bad actors internationally to account, but also to hold democratic states and their behavior, for example, when they engage in offensive activities, to account. Like in traditional warfare, both an explicit mandate and a process for ensuring that state operations are run within the limits of the law are needed. And there is no doubt that democratic states must prevent attacks from being successful and attach consequences to the perpetrators. But the foundation upon which such operations are based should be explicit and accountable with respect to the rule of law, and they're not today. As of today, Ukrainians hope that they can develop a powerful tech sector when the war is over. But despite the big words from CEOs about making a decisive difference, Ukrainians are in the trenches, and it's not looking like the war will be won by them, let alone thanks to US tech support. In the EU, there are concerns about the powers of private companies, CEOs like Elon Musk, for example, and so investments in public satellite constellations have gone up. I think the US is worried too, but it's been said multiple times today that there are very low expectations about what the Congress can do. And there are obviously reasons to be concerned about tech policy too when we look at November. What I'm trying to illustrate with all these recent examples is that the problem at hand when we look at tech governance is systematic, while often the problems we're treating are symptoms. With examples all around us, it is tempting to see them as yet another innovation, incident, or case of misuse. But I could have also focused on the example that was mentioned a number of times today, AI's misuses of representations such as the Black Nazis, could have focused more deeply on cryptocurrencies or on cybersecurity. And that would actually make the same point, that we have to make sure that we see the connection between all these different incidents, which is the outsized power of tech companies, and that we don't see them as yet another incident in a long, long row. We are still talking a lot about the harms from social media companies. And of course, I would never dispute that this is a serious problem. But I do think it would be a mistake to think that if we solve those, we would be finished. I would actually argue that the mental and political space of policymakers is focusing disproportionately, so too much, on social media companies, and unfortunately often without even being successful. We're still regulating yesterday's problems, while tomorrow's issues are already sneaking in through the unregulated back door. So I'm going to wrap up, and sorry, it's harder to speak when you're pregnant, so I'm a little bit out of breath. I hope you don't mind my breath being a little shorter. I fear tech companies have too much power and are amassing more, from cybersecurity to infrastructure, from curating our information environments to having power over people's agency when AI discriminates or when companies mark the front lines of war. Now, briefly, because I started by saying tech policy is a hot topic, and actually I do think a lot is being done, but I'll try to give a quick overview of what that is. Sometimes companies are being embraced and are considered the best defense of democracy. We see this model when we hear CEOs saying, give us space, a break from regulation, because we are your best answer to China. Another approach is to do very little in terms of public policy. Unfortunately, we see this model in the United States for whichever reasons, but not much policy is happening here. Of course, the executive branch is doing what it can. We see people like FTC Chair Lina Khan, who has a broad vision of how antitrust breaches also touch on human rights issues like privacy or on democracy. And so I consider that an indirect way of tackling democratic governance problems, because there's a hope that stronger antitrust enforcement will somehow trickle down to improve democratic governance. But I think if we really worry so much about the outsized power of corporations, we shouldn't treat it as a side effect of antitrust policies, but really tackle it much more directly. The EU has really adopted a whole host of laws over the past decade, anything from the GDPR to the Digital Services Act, to the Digital Markets Act, to the AI Act that was discussed this morning. But to some extent, this is also a piecemeal approach, and we really have to ask ourselves, do all the different pieces add up to the desired result? Are there cracks between the different laws that can be exploited, or inconsistencies? There are a growing number of global governance initiatives, notably on AI. There's a lot of momentum now. But of course, some things we call AI today, we used to call social media, autonomous weapons, or data in the past. Everything is now AI. But a lot of these global governance initiatives are non-binding. And I think it is important to always keep in mind, is there a legal basis? Are there enforcement mechanisms? Or are these mostly declarations of principle and intent that can still be very powerful, but different than those initiatives with the force of law? And speaking about that force of law, any initiative can only be as successful as its success of enforcement. And enforcement is often an afterthought. I often speak to regulatory bodies. I can give you another example from the country I know best. The Dutch authority that is responsible for data protection got an increase in budget last year of 1 million euros for regulating algorithms, which will be scaled up to 3 million euros. And when I've said this in the context of many Europeans meeting in a room, I said, I don't know if I should laugh or cry, because 1 million, what is it, you know? At the same time, what is the total budget of the AI Safety Institute in the US? I heard it's around 3 million. So what are we even putting up against these multi-billion-dollar companies it is, or trillion-dollar companies now? It is so asymmetrical that it's actually very sad. So we need to rethink the relationship between policy and enforcement, but also think about what preconditions must be in place in order to be successful at making public policy. So that is about access to information for both researchers like many of you, but also for regulators. It is about access to data and compute in the public interest, and it is about budgets for enforcement. Now, all of this may lead you to believe that I'm a pessimist about where we are. I'm not. I think there is a lot of political awakening as to the sense of urgency to course correct. And we see governments really jumping into action, particularly after they realize the powers of generative AI. But it is helpful that we begin with clarifications of how laws on the books apply. It is often stated, for example, the US government has said that the full force of the law will be used to regulate AI. It is not so clear as to how. Similarly, in international law, it is commonplace to say laws apply online as they do offline. Great. Let's focus on how. So we need to operationalize some of these principles that are stated as a solution if we want them to be useful. And certainly there's a lot more that needs to be done to make sure that we treat the problems that we see as systemic and not as symptomatic. So I'll end there, and I'm happy to ask or answer actually some of your questions if we still have time. Thank you.
Rather than taking cards, we'll do by the microphone. Thank you. That was a wonderful exposition. I was curious to learn, how do you see the power tension between technology and policy playing out in the Global South?
Yeah. Thanks for asking, because I actually turned my page and here it was, Global South. Because one of the problems is that there's not enough working mechanisms that either look at how laws made, let's say in the EU, trickle down to impact people in the Global South, or to try to represent people in the Global South better when their own governments don't represent their rights or their interests. And there's also a capacity challenge in many ways. There are no supercomputers in the Global South, which is a real problem. And there's also not always the policy capacity at all, even if there's a political will. So it is a great topic. We're building a program on tech policy in the Global South at Stanford to try to bridge some of those gaps. I think one thing to be looking out for is the UN high-level advisory body, where we very much focus on the role of the Global South and course correcting, because the UN has a unique role to actually be global, but also because it is so desperately needed.
Any questions on this side?
You mentioned trying to attract more tech and policy people to government positions or policy positions rather than tech companies. What's a good way the government can do that when, like, frankly, I couldn't live in the Bay Area with my family on most government salaries?
Right. I hope it's a little better in DC, but I'm not sure. I think governments have to really rethink also things like salaries. But also, when I look at the students that I teach, they are hardly ever exposed to inspiring stories by policymakers. We're trying to change that through a program. We have the Tech Ethics and Policy Fellowship. But it is so much easier in so many ways, not only financially, to go to companies when you're a computer scientist than to even understand what you could do that's of enormous value within the government. Whereas when we have guest speakers from CISA, when we have guest speakers from the FTC, from the NTIA, from Congress, I can often see students really, I see some kind of spark happening for them. And I've also seen computer scientists course change and apply to law school because they really think that contributing to the public interest is worth it, but they may have just not known how to do it. So I think the government should be much more clear and be creative and ambitious, not only increasing the budgets for regulators, but also for attracting talent. And the hard thing is governments cannot say, give us more money. It's like a very unpopular message. But I think we need to 10x, 20x the budgets for talent and for enforcement. I'm not talking about 50% more, which is, would already be a lot more than there is now. We have to make the case for exponentially more capacity on the part of the public.
Thank you for your steering analysis. It was super insightful. I have two questions for you. The first part is, what are your broad views on the AI safety conversations? And do you think it's impeding, or do you think it's actually advancing national security interests? And just also follow up to that is, you spoke about how cyber attacks are in this ambivalent area. What do you think more about attacking AI systems themselves?
Right. So the first part, the whole AI safety discussion in the context of national security, some governments, very ambitious about AI safety, are also very ambitious about attracting investments. So I think to some extent it functions a little bit as a shield to reassure people while also being very driven to simply develop AI without too many restrictions. I think the UK model is one of those. Much will depend on how safety will be defined. So if the concept will be stretched to also talk about non-discrimination, to also talk about the integrity of elections, to also talk about notions like public health, public well-being, which you could argue are all related to safety, obviously, then I think it will take a very different shape than if it will be defined through a very narrow lens of, let's say, biotech risks or, breakaway AI or autonomous weapon systems or something like that. So there's room also to make your voices heard. This is still work in progress. I talk to governments who are wrestling with this all the time. And even if the political statements have been made, the implementation is still very much ongoing. And then your second question, the additional risk of the uptake of AI. I mean, the way I look at it is that I think it's Mikko Hipponen's book that says whatever is smart is vulnerable. Everything software can be hacked, and it has not been treated as such. In fact, there's been an enormous push also to governments, to small, medium-sized enterprises, to hospitals, that they were lagging behind, not serving their citizens, patients, customers, if they were not uptaking tech, if they were not digitizing, automating, and so on. But of course, the downsides are enormous because software, essentially, I don't have to tell you, is unsecurable. And also, there have not been enough incentives on the parts of companies to actually do more. Because if you look at the most classified systems in the US government, breached. If you look at critical infrastructure, IT systems, breached. If you look at commercial companies like dating apps or I don't even know how to call these other things, like Ashley Madison or Second Love or whatever. Is that a dating app or is it something else? Anyway, you know what I mean? Like the incentive on the part of those companies to treat people's data carefully is enormous, right? Like nobody wants to be exposed as having an affair through an online connection and still breached. So we have a problem, and the uptake of AI adds more software, so it also adds more vulnerability. And yes, there are also ways to deploy AI to find software vulnerabilities, and it's a cat and mouse game, I get it. But I don't think we can decisively say it's going to be good. I think bad actors are already working overtime to see how they can use AI for more ransomware attacks, for more disinformation dissemination. And I missed that in the discussion. You know, there's a lot of discussion about AI, companies praising all the opportunities. You know, cancer will be cured, maybe the climate crisis too. Productivity is going to increase exponentially. I mean, these are extraordinary promises, but we don't hear about, well, beware, because everything will also become more vulnerable. And I think that that's at least going to happen, and hopefully we can respond quickly enough. Don't know where to look for. Yes.
We go. Good afternoon. To steel man your students' arguments for a second, in the emerging paradigm of eroding trust in institutions and questionable compliance by companies like Starlink with government regulations and or mandates, doesn't this kind of act as an opportunity, an inflection point to invert regulatory capture? We have been concerned for such a long time of industry coming in, lobbying government, and setting the standards that they are comfortable with. Isn't this more a time now for people who are studying public policy or public affairs or are interested in the public good, more of a time now to go into these companies, into these roles to try to reform from within and to push back against the profit motive and or the business motive that these companies have? Thank you.
So of course it is, but at the same time, and I'm sure the corporate representatives in this room know better than I do, what company lets the newest employees decide their ethics and public policy lines? Usually no. So I've seen a lot of students who went in with the drive that you just so well articulated, you know, let's change things from within, but it's incredibly hard in practice. It only works when there's buy-in from the top. And as a former lawmaker, I'm not so inclined to listen to the companies that are well-willing. I think it's the role of government to draw one benchmark for the willing, for the unwilling, for the compliant, for the non-compliant. There just has to be a rule that applies to everyone. And then, you know, good for you if your company is already over that line and complying, great, less work for you. But we cannot depend on the mood or the strategy of one CEO or another.
Last question.
Hi. I have a question. My question is, what are your thoughts or reactions about recent early attempts to regulate? The example I want to call out is the Biden administration's recent regulations in healthcare that would require any company developing an AI for clinical use to disclose how it was trained. So, you know, healthcare is already kind of a pretty regulated space, so it's easy to understand why they would start with healthcare. But do you see this expanding beyond just this one sector? And do you think that simple disclosure of training methods and data and whatnot is sufficient? Thanks.
Thanks. I have to say I'm not as familiar with either the healthcare sector or the proposal that you just mentioned, but it's indeed logical that a sensitive and well-regulated area like healthcare would come into view. Sure, it helps to show, you know, what data is used and how the models were trained, but it's not the only type of transparency that is helpful. And I hope that not only looking at the technical characteristics of AI models, but really also at the effects that they have within society will inform public policy. You know, there's a bit of a tendency now, and this also relates back to the question about, you know, working in government. There's sometimes a tendency to say, well, politicians don't understand AI or technology and they can't regulate it. Or what computer scientists would want to work in government. But we also need social scientists. You know, we also need behavioral economists. We also need others to really look at what are the effects that we see of AI, not just what are the systems that we're building and deploying. So I do think this is a field with opportunities for a multitude of disciplines, which will hopefully come together. And I think government rules can really help set the tone for what is needed, and then, you know, drive people to also make those choices for their own careers and so on. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all so much. I know it's been a really long day, but trust me, this is the most exciting part of today. And we are announcing the inaugural recipients of the UC Berkeley Tech Integrity Awards. The UC Berkeley Tech Integrity Awards are given out in 5 categories, recognizing leadership in a way that promotes responsible innovation and policy. Awards are given to honor achievements and contributions in the following 5 categories. The first, academic research, contributing to groundbreaking research, education, or thought leadership in tech policy. The second, civil society, non-governmental organizations, activists, or social entrepreneurs working to ensure responsible innovation and accountability. The third category, government, public sector entities or individuals working in an official capacity to shape responsible tech policy. The fourth, industry, companies or individuals within the tech industry leading on responsible technology development and governance. And the last category, journalism, individual journalists and media organizations that effectively inform, cover, and scrutinize tech policy issues. And we are joined today, I believe, with 4 out of the 5 recipients of the inaugural Tech Integrity Awards. I am going to change up the schedule here a little bit and how we present. So we'll first go with civil society. And I believe Dean Wilson, you're presenting this award in civil society.
Crash happens in the background.
Exactly. So I'll ask the recipients to get a little bit closer to the stage. We have an announcement about part of the nomination. So you'll hear what the nominee said about the individual who was nominated. After you receive your award, please come onto the stage together with the award so that you can be photographed. Because we are all very proud of you and we want to capture this moment forever. So.
Thank you. All right. Well, I'm pleased to be the first award provider of the first ever Tech Integrity Awards, the first ever Goldman School Tech Policy Summit. This is great. So I feel very pleased and honored. What are you doing? What are you pushing?
I'm pushing buttons.
Pushing buttons. All right, good.
I'm going to, sorry, we're out of order, but there we go.
There you go. All right. My name is David Wilson. I'm Dean of the Goldman School of Public Policy and a professor of public policy and political science. Really excited about the event and really excited about this particular award around civil society. The Tech Integrity Award in Civil Society recognizes non-governmental organizations, activists, or social entrepreneurs working to ensure responsible innovation and accountability. This year's recipient is X Ai, CEO of Malo Santo. Please give X a round of applause. As you've heard during the panel, she's brilliant. She's a brilliant intellectual. I'm sorry, they're a brilliant intellectual, who served their country via the U.S. Army and is now advocating for algorithm justice. We continuously meet with X at the Goldman School to hear her thoughts around change and what's necessary to make sure that we can train the next generation of leaders in areas of compliance and trust and security. X formerly worked at Microsoft on cutting-edge ambient intelligence solutions that combine blockchain, AI, IoT for Fortune 500 companies around the world. And at Google, X worked across all of Google AI's products and research to ensure that they were built responsibly and ethically. How'd that go?
I'm not there anymore.
Not there anymore. That's great. X created a novel research teams, including the skin tone team, which developed techniques to improve AI's ability to recognize diverse skin tones. This work set new industry standards for measuring skin tone in AI and enhanced products like the Pixel phone's camera and Google's image search. We are pleased to honor you with the first award in civil society. So thank you very much, X. Thank you. Happy to. Got to come on stage.
We're switching up with it.
All right.
Academic research. Okay, next is the recipient in academic research. You could come up here. Jennifer King and Camille Crittenden.
Thank you. It's my honor to present this award, the Tech Integrity Award for Academic Research, to Dr. Jennifer King, Privacy and Data Policy Fellow at Stanford's Human-Centered AI and a UC Berkeley doctoral graduate of the School of Information. Woohoo! Dr. King's pioneering work in the field of tech policy, particularly in privacy and data protection, stands at the intersection of technology ethics and human rights, offering critical insights and practical frameworks for navigating the challenges posed by digital technologies. Her dedication to advancing public understanding of tech policy issues through both her research and her role in educating the next generation of leaders in tech policy exemplifies a commitment to thought leadership and integrity in the tech sphere. Dr. King's efforts not only push the boundaries of academic research, but also contribute to the development of informed ethical tech policies that prioritize human welfare, aligning with the core values the UC Berkeley Tech Integrity Award aims to recognize and celebrate. Please join me in congratulating Jennifer King.
And Camille will keep you up here to do industry.
Sure. Great, so Kathy is up next, right? Okay.
Yes.
Great, I'm really delighted to present this award to esteemed colleague, Kathy Baxter. This year's recipient, Kathy Baxter, is the principal architect of responsible AI and tech at Salesforce and a fellow at NIST. Kathy is a leading figure in the responsible development and implementation of artificial intelligence. Her work has been pivotal in establishing and promoting industry standards for responsible AI, ensuring that technology not only advances in capability, but does so with a keen eye to ethical considerations, user trust, and societal impact. Baxter's contributions, characterized by a commitment to transparency, fairness, and accountability in AI systems, have set a benchmark for responsible technology practices, influencing both policy and product development across the tech sector, and embodying the values of integrity and leadership the award seeks to honor. Please join me in congratulating Kathy.
What am I doing on the stage? Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ed Wasserman. I specialize in media ethics and professor of journalism and former dean of the Graduate School of Journalism here at UC Berkeley. It's my great pleasure to honor a man who's not with us, unfortunately. We'll have to honor him in absentia, the Tech Integrity Award in Journalism, which recognizes journalists and media organizations that cover, scrutinize, and illuminate tech policy issues. This year's recipient is Mike Isaac, technology reporter at the New York Times. Through his incisive reporting, Mike has consistently shed light on the ethical quandaries, privacy concerns, and societal impacts of the technology sector, holding some of the industry's biggest players accountable. His work is characterized by meticulous research, impartiality, and a commitment to presenting complex issues in an accessible manner, thereby empowering readers with a nuanced understanding of the digital world. Mike's dedication to uncovering the truth behind the tech industry's glossy exterior not only exemplifies the highest standards of journalism, but also contributes significantly to public discourse on technology's role in society. So please join me in congratulating Mike. We'll let him know, and thank you very much.
RBK. You weren't going to be here. Really excited because thought you weren't going to be here. I'm here. You're here now. Thank you. Yeah, it's a nice run. The Tech Integrity Award in government recognizes public sector entities or individuals working in an official capacity to shape responsible tech policy. This year's recipient is Assemblymember Rebecca Bauer Kahan. Kahan, all right. Unfortunately, is where it said you weren't going to be here. All right, now you're here. Well, let's talk about where you are. Yeah, fortunately, you're here. You've played an instrumental role in advancing responsible AI and tech policy. It shows your deservingness of this particular award. Your efforts in crafting legislation that address the urgent need for ethical standards and transparency within the tech industry have set a benchmark for legislative action on technology issues. Assemblymember, your commitment to protecting consumer rights, enhancing privacy protections, and fostering safer digital environments reflects a dedication to public service and ethical governance in a rapidly evolving tech landscape. Congratulations and welcome to Berkeley again.
Thank you.
Come on up, let's take a picture.
Hey. And thank you all so much for joining us for this award ceremony. One thing that was quite interesting and insightful, without actually purposely doing so, most of the recipients, if not all, have some affiliation with this university. Go Bears. It shows, exactly. It shows that we have the talent in tech policy and responsible innovation. And so I'm very proud of the inaugural recipients of the UC Berkeley Tech Integrity Awards. And with that, I get to happily pass it on to Dean Wilson for final concluding remarks.
Thank you very much. I will be very brief. The first thing I want to do is thank everyone who played a role in this event today. GSPP, if you are staff or faculty at GSPP, can you wave your hands, lecturers included, all of our folks, raise your hands, please. Thank you very much. The Citrus Policy Lab, Brandy, Camille, other researchers who are here. The School of Information, anybody left from the School of Information? I know Jennifer is here. Others, I see others. There's Shanti here, anybody? You do lose people in this room. Sponsors, Center for Law and Technology, Center for Long-Term Cybersecurity, AI Policy Hub, Berkeley Journalism, and Human Rights Center at Berkeley. Thank you all. Please give a round of applause to our sponsors. I also saw a couple of our advisory board members. John Gage, is David here? David Zhang here still? He left. All right, very good. John, you're there. Thank you for coming and joining us. One thing that we try and do when we're exploring new initiatives and new ideas is get really good advice. And John, from the start, you've been able to give us some really good advice, and I appreciate your time and attention. One thing is for sure, this event really shows that there's energy and there's a real strong push behind tech policy at Berkeley. And I want to just say, I got here in 2021, right kind of after COVID, but not yet after COVID. And the summer, and nobody was around except our Masters of Public Affairs students. And this idea of having a tech policy initiative was actually started by the students. So I want to just tell you, just identify 5 individuals who've made this possible to just give you a sense of the power of Berkeley. The first person is Henry Brady, former dean of the Goldman School. Henry, please, wait. Henry was my predecessor. He laid the foundation for innovation and excellence at Goldman that allowed us to think about what was possible, what we could do next. And so Henry, giving me full information about how Berkeley works and, patience and things like that was great as a foundation. And then I said, well, thank you. And then I started running forth with other things. So thank you, Henry, for giving me the leeway to kind of run with new ideas and be supported throughout and be here. The second person was Nida Osei. Where's Nida? Is she still here? Nida, there you are. Nida was one of the first MPA students that I met that not only lobbied me, but it bordered on harassment to ensure that you need to get tech policy. You need to understand this. And I'm a political psychologist. I studied public opinion and a number of it, and I just didn't understand fully. And we would just have these long conversations about the value. And what it did was it really sparked imagination in my mind about what was possible. So while I had a faculty member that gave me a foundation, I had a student that actually sparked the idea and really pushed us to think about what was possible. So thank you, Nida. Thank you. Please give me a round of applause. Once you have the spark of an idea, you really need a vision. Again, this is not my area. I really needed someone to help me think about this. So Ziyang Fang, a lecturer in the Goldman School, thank you, Ziyang. Ziyang sat me down at a picnic table on Goldman's courtyard, and not harassing me, but talking to me about the range of possibilities and options for what tech policy could be and why Goldman is the policy school that should lead it, not just in California, but in the world. And so your vision really helped to charge us forward in thinking about, all right, what should we do to take action? So thank you, Zion. Then, of course, the fourth person, all of you all have met Brandy Noneke. Brandy, Nida was quite forceful. Brandy was probably more forceful. The first conversation we had, I think it was, I may be paraphrased, she said, what faculty do you have prioritized in tech policy? I said, well, none. And I'm new. I said, none. I don't know what we have anything. She said, well, you should. This be a priority for Goldman School. And so we talked about it. And so our first faculty member in tech policy was Brandy Noneke. So well done. You had an ulterior motive. It was really smart. And now we actually have, where's Professor Andrew Reddy in the back has joined us. We have several prominent members of our faculty who are lecturers, and we just hired our first ladder-ranked faculty member in tech policy, Diak Davenport, who's coming to us from a postdoc at Princeton and a PhD in behavioral economics from Booth at Chicago. So we are slowly building out our expertise. And as I hear people in this room talk about tech policy, trust me, you're on the radar for joining our faculty in a number of different ways. So don't think you get to come and share and then leave. It doesn't work that way. And then finally, once you've got the foundation, you've got the spark, you've got the vision, you've got the energy, you've got to have a bridge builder. You've got to have someone to help connect all these things and track and monitor. And that was Jean Ching. Where's Jean? Jean. Throughout all of this, Jean has kept all these ideas in front of us while also doing other things and working on other strategic initiatives. We really believe that Goldman can lead the way on tech policy and be a bridge for other experts on campus, in our local community, Silicon Valley, in Sacramento, state of California, the nation, and the world. We do have the rich intellectual assets here at Berkeley to really have impact. And the key is to make sure we understand how they can work together. And so, Jean, you've been really tremendous and a great joy to work with in making this happen. So thank you very much for your contribution. And so this is the power of Berkeley, that an idea could start with a very basic foundation around what the role of a university and a public policy school is, from a conversation about what we should be doing to an idea about where we should go with it and what kinds of actions we could take, and then how to make it happen given all the other things we're trying to do. Berkeley is a place of expansive discovery, expansive energy, an ability to believe that anything is possible if we really focus in on it. We don't have a lot of money. Despite this room, we don't have a lot of shiny objects here in shiny office space. We have a lot of students that really believe that they can make a change. We have a lot of faculty that are willing to sacrifice a lot from other universities to be here in this public space to have impact. And so if you're thinking about a way to invest, a way to partner, a way to contribute, a public university, the #1 public university, working with the #1 school of public policy, the Goldman School of Public Policy, come join us. Come with us. Help us make this even stronger than it can be. So this is now a tech policy initiative, but I assure you it will be much more than that in the future. So thank you for joining us. Please, I know we'll have some reception-ing over here, and get a business card, take a name, take a number, and we'll see you at the next one. You have one final thing?
Yes, I do.
Ladies and gentlemen, Brandy Noneke.
Thank you. No, just thank you all so much for coming today. And then just, I would like the recipients, before you run off with your award, please come up to the stage. Brittany's giving me the eye, you got to do this. So please come up to the stage with your award and we'll take a final group photo. Again, thank you all very much for joining today. And there is some drinks and reception. Thank you.